Hello, everyone, and welcome to Quadrant 4 Politics. My name is Riley, and I'm here with my co host, Matt.
Hello.
And welcome to our podcast where we talk about news and politics from a conservative and libertarian perspective. However, we are welcoming to people from all over the political compass. Today's date is November 9th. That's the day we're recording it. It's just a couple days after the midterms. And be sure to check us out on SoundCloud. We pay a premium for that service, so listen to us on there. It's easier to listen on SoundCloud, so I highly recommend it. But you can also find us on YouTube. And yeah, today's episode is going to be a pretty simply organized one. First, we're going to start with our grab bag question that we start every episode with. And then we're going to discuss guns and gun control. That's a hotly debated topic in this country.
Gun control and gun rights, and where do they meet?
Gun rights. And we don't know what the title of this episode is going to be yet, but I'm sure we'll come up with something fun. Let's start with our grab bag question. While Matt is picking a question, I'll tell you guys what this is. What it is we took the political compass test and cut up all the questions, put them in a grab bag for Matt to choose one randomly.
I always get to be the picker.
Yeah, he always gets
That's
to be the picker. And the political compass is not something we stand behind 100%. However, it is fun. I feel like we should always give that disclaimer. Jesus Christ, Matt, will you pick one?
Loves you. Okay.
Okay. We got one.
Question 44 out of 62. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded.
Man, I hate these fucking weird questions.
What do you mean? It's
not a question
It's
I
making
even
you
consider political.
Well, but it's making you think, and it does define who you are.
It does make me think. Let me read it one more time for the audience. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. I'd say if you agree with that one, you're probably authoritarian. It probably says you're authoritarian on the test, but I would probably say agree with it just because I do believe in jobs. Wait, what does it say? People always be above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. In a work setting, yeah. What is your response to this one?
My response, I don't know how I originally responded, again, because from day to day your opinions can change on things, but currently as we sit here right now, my answer would be agree, not strongly agree.
Oh yeah, I should say for the audience, the answers are either strongly disagree, agree, or strongly agree.
Mm-hmm. And I would say agree. And the reason is because let's look at it in a work setting. You got your entry-level workers, and they respond to the manager. The manager responds to the upper management. Upper management responds to corporate or owners. Mm-hmm. Owners respond to the government. They pay taxes, agencies, whatnot. These agencies are audited by the state. Even within government, there's always somebody above you.
Yeah.
You're technically working for the people who voted you in, and the same people can fire you, essentially, through either impeachment or more likely through the re-election process. But let's just talk about in day-to-day life in general. Authority is always going to be something we run into. If you go into a grocery store and start knocking things off the shelf, and an employee of the store comes out and says, you need to leave, and you don't leave, then at that point, you're in their territory without their permission, and you have not listened to their demands, and so that sets you up to be in legal trouble. And then the authority there would be the police. So there's always consequences for our actions. Part of what this says is in a civilized society.
Yeah.
I don't think with this question it means that we can't have our freedoms. I think it just means in order to have those freedoms, there has to be a certain amount of things we agree on that are just appropriate behavior and not appropriate behavior. And again, this is talking about society, not in the workplace. But yeah, even in society, there's, authority figures to keep us safe. But I guess, part of it is everybody has have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. There doesn't always have to be. I mean, you could just be
On the bottom rung.
you could be on the bottom rung, a 16-year-old kid who is obedient to his parents, to the law, to his boss at work, to his school, and he can eventually become one of the people. But this to me is really just a question about authority, and authority, some structure of authority is necessary to maintain a civilized society. So that's what my thought is on that.
I think that this is kind of a bullshit question. I think it's part of the reason why the political compass test is so flawed, at least this version of it, is because the person who wrote this question, who knows how they thought that the answers would go. I think, obviously, as a libertarian, I should disagree with it. And I think if you said you agree, you'd be more authoritarian on the compass. However, it's kind of a bullshit question because it's like, of course there's an order to society. There always has been. It's just human nature to have an order. Wolves have a leader of the wolf pack. It's kind of, and no one. You can't just have everyone in a society be of this equal same status. I mean, we can try, but I don't think it's ever proven effective in history, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So. My answer to this one is agree, but I think it's kind of a bullshit question overall.
Yeah, and of course the test, they do not give away the equation of how they calculate your score as to what quadrant you end up in, but I would probably agree with you. It would probably make one more authoritarian, but this is also just the truth. Unless you're an anarchist, which a libertarian is, a step or two
there's different,
above an anarchist.
Yeah, there's within the libertarian community, there's people called anarcho-capitalists, and they're very close to just straight anarchism.
Yeah, well, I mean,
their idea is that the police force should be made by a company. Like a company should own the police force.
But there would still be a police force and authority, and you would still have to have people making a decision of what the penalty is.
Yeah,
and then this would eventually turn back into a government.
Yeah.
So
that's why I don't consider myself an anarcho-capitalist.
So anyway, I think it just makes sense that you would either agree or strongly agree with this. So my answer is agree. Your answer is agree.
Yep.
And all right.
Cool. All right. So let's. That was fun.
That was fun.
Thanks, Matt, for joining me on that fun adventure. So let's talk about guns. Let's talk about gun rights, gun control. Obviously, it's a huge issue in our country, mostly because of the mass shootings that happen all the time. Mass shooting just happened like frickin' hours after the election, it seems like. And, there's drive-by shootings in our country. Gun violence is very prevalent. Another thing that needs to be discussed within guns is suicide, because guns are used for suicide a lot. There's a lot of discussion with guns, and obviously it's not something that we can just solve on this podcast that we're going to have at 45 minutes, but it's something let's have fun discussing it. What are your main thoughts on guns, Matt? Because I know that you have a what would I say? Your opinion of them is slightly changing.
Yeah.
Your opinion of guns is dynamic.
My opinions are always changing, and I'm the type of person, I've said before, that my political views are different than how they were 10 years ago, and they're different from what they're going to be in 10 years. And I hope in 10 years they're more evolved and thought out. The
laws?
No, my opinions.
Oh, okay.
I think that what we think about something should always be a search for the truth. So what is not the answer you like or want to hear, but what is ultimately correct. And I don't think either side of the extremes of taking away your guns or, the guns for everybody, no restrictions, I don't think either of those rightly address some of the key points that are being discussed because of these mass shootings and just because of gun violence in general. So, yeah, that's just kind of, I mean, I have there's all these little subcategories within guns of, how old do you think somebody should be? Should they be able to have this type of gun, location, tracking, registering, licensing, all this stuff. And of course, you can have all sorts of different opinions on that. And even, I mean, you could make a whole political compass test just for guns.
Yeah.
And
you absolutely could.
I think the question, the reason we are doing the gun topic today is because on our ballots for Washington State, one of the propositions, I think it was I-1639, don't quote me on that. One of the propositions was to keep ARs out of assault rifles.
You had to be 21 to buy.
Make them 21
rifles.
Instead of 18.
And is that the same with handguns? Do you have to be 21 to buy handguns in our
Yeah, and
state?
that's how it has been.
So now in Washington State, you have to be 21 to buy a gun.
Well, yeah. So the law was basically, the way it was advertised was changing it from 18 to 21, and I was not sure how I was going to vote on this, even when last time in our last podcast I said next week we'll be discussing guns. At that point, I still hadn't made up my mind of how I would be voting on this. I am somebody who always reads the voter's guide back to front, and it's really annoying because it takes me, even on a small ballot, it takes me usually hours to vote. Anyway, of course, packed within that was more than just, should we raise the age for assault rifles from 18 to 21? There's another part they put in there about you have to keep your guns locked up in a reasonable spot to where if anybody was to get a hold of them and use them for harm, it would be a crime.
Yeah, you had to have your guns locked in a locker of some sort. So if you have a handgun, you have to have a handgun locker, which can be one of those portable briefcases, or you can have like one of those ones that are almost like the size of a closet, or
like a gun vault,
like a wardrobe almost that locks, and you put guns in there. Yeah. So now it's the law that you have to have your guns locked up, or else you can get in trouble. I'm not sure what the trouble is. But...
So from what I was reading, it said that basically, if the gun is accessed and used for a bad purpose, so it's kind of like you're not going to get in trouble just for them not being locked up, but if something bad happens for it,
because from my understanding, it was they had to be locked up.
Well, but are the police going to walk through everybody's house and check?
Well, if there's some reason why they go into your house,
and it's in plain view,
thing, yeah.
Yeah, I guess. But what it also said was that people weren't going to be prosecuted if, for example, somebody broke into the house and a child was able to access the gun, even though they shouldn't have been able to access the gun, but the child ends up, saving the family because they stopped the burglar. Or, there was all sorts of these other, stipulations. Basically, they were trying to make it to where you're not going to get in trouble for, they don't want to get anybody in trouble for saving the day. And that's understandable. But having your guns locked up, some people sleep with guns at the side of their bed, and they do that because
it's protection.
And I mean, we live in an area with probably a pretty low crime rate compared to the rest of the country. And so, if the rest of the country has, people like that, or situations like that where they have people just breaking in or are a constant threat, I don't know that locking them up is the best idea if you need quick and easy access. I wish we lived in a world where we didn't need guns at all, but that's just not the reality of the situation. So,
what was the third part of the ballot? I'm trying to look it up right now, but the third part, it was There was one that you had to be 21 to buy a rifle. You had to lock up your guns. Wasn't there a third part that was the main decision you and I voted no on? It was because it was so subjective.
Was it something about like safety training or?
Man, I can't remember. I wish we had looked it up. I can't. I can't just find the facts on here. But I wanted to ask you individually about those things. Do you think that people should be 21 to have to buy a gun?
So, had that been the argument, my answer would be I would have voted yes. And this is hard for me to say because this is pretty close to home because I have a sister who lost some friends in a house shooting. And the situation was a 19-year-old bought an AR on the same day. He went to a house party. He read the manual and he went in and killed 3 people, one of which my sister was pretty close to. It was a pretty big tragedy. It wasn't a mass shooting in terms of, 10 or more people, and we'll get into mass shootings and what the definition is. But the fact is it was because it was his first girlfriend. He didn't respond rationally to it. And we've talked in another episode about the cognitive abilities of children, or the cognitive levels of children, and our brains don't stop maturing until we're in our early 20s. And I believe that's part of the reason for the gun age. I could be wrong. So to move ARs into a separate category,
Let's correct the language on assault rifle. Assault rifle is something that liberals use to scare people. Assault rifles are a more subgenre of guns. I think the ballot was just according to rifles, because pretty much the two types of guns are rifles and handguns. Like there's submachine guns, you do not see those very often. So I'm not sure if they're considered assault rifles or handguns, or I mean rifles or handguns. But we're talking about rifles here, which is the two-handed guns, the long guns.
The long guns versus the small guns. Yeah. Okay, so.
But what do you think about them being locked up? Do you think that should have been a law?
I mean, let's look at Sandy Hook.
Mm-hmm.
The kid got a gun from a parent who obviously didn't lock it up properly.
Mm-hmm.
He killed his mom. Then he went and he killed like 20 first and second graders. Like, that's devastating. That's horrible. And it could have been prevented had she just locked it up. And there's the argument that where there's a will, there's a way. But if everybody had the code of, okay, we're going to lock up our guns for safety, then there might be less of a problem. But then it also takes away from your ability to access that gun when needed. And honestly, I'm not a hunter. I don't use guns for sport. I've considered getting a gun, but if I do, it's going to be basically for self-defense. It's going to be because we live in such a dangerous world where these things are happening all the time. So locking them up, I think, is a good idea. And I think definitely if your child gets a hold of it and causes destruction, you should be prosecuted for that. You should be responsible for the child's action. But if you're in a situation where you live alone, or you live with only adults who are not felons, let's say, you should not have to have your guns locked up. Maybe in a secured, unknown location, that's fine. But locked up, no. I think you need to be able to they need to be reasonably accessible. And for that reason, I voted no. And I never talked to my sister about this because on the voting pamphlet, the first person where it said written by, it said the guy's name, and then it said, shooting survivor of the city.
Yeah.
And that was really hard for me because it was almost like, am I going to vote against my sister, who lost a friend because of this? And when it comes to the age thing, like, I get it, but having people lock them up is, I think, going a step too far, especially in certain, unless you say in a house with kids under, whatever age.
Yeah. Well, let me give my input on these. I am a lot more freedom focused on guns than you are. Obviously, I don't think that the age should have been raised. I think the age should be lowered. As I am with everything, we had our age of consent video. And age of consent doesn't just apply to sex, it applies to everything in life, in my opinion, unless, for lack of a better word, age of consent is my general term for that. I think that younger people should be treated as adults just because I think that they deserve freedom younger. So I think the age to buy a gun should be lower. As to how low, I really don't know. I haven't decided that for myself. Probably in the same age that I think people should be able to have sex, around 13, 14. Um, Locking it up, I think that should it definitely shouldn't be a law. I think that should be people's own personal choice if they want to lock up their guns or not. And if you are forcing people to lock up their guns, they're just going to tell their kids the access code. They're going to be like, "Hey, little Jimmy, if someone breaks into our house, the access code is 321." And so the kid's going to know the access code anyway because the parents want the kid to be safe. And if there is a break-in, it's like, hold on, don't shoot me. I got to go unlock my gun real quick so I can shoot
Yeah.
you. So,
well, except maybe you don't necessarily need to tell little Jimmy because it's in a safe that's in your room to where if you're going to be in the room at night, and the alarm goes off and Jimmy's room's further down the hall, he doesn't need to get to the gun.
What if the break-in's in his room? What if you're not rich enough to have an alarm? You can't hear the break-in.
I get what you're saying.
What if you're rich enough to own a huge home so you can't hear the break-in in his room, but you can't? But you're not rich enough for an alarm.
I gotcha. There's lots of, ultimately what it comes down to is we could get rid of guns and evil's still going to exist in the world.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I sound like a crazy religious person, and I do believe in God, and I do believe in evil, and I do believe evil is running rampant in our world. And I believe if it's not guns, it's going to be something else, because if people want to cause destruction, they're going to cause destruction.
Well, getting rid of guns just proves that more people are going to be driving trucks down the sidewalk, obliterating people that way, using knives, using guns, using acid. There's all sorts of ways to, cause mass destruction. So this fear of guns is kind of just dumb.
Like, why don't we make cars illegal?
Exactly. And it's like cars kill way more people than guns do every year. And I don't own a car, and as a matter of fact, I ride my bike most days, and fuck, man, it's scary out there. You get cars drive real close to you. It's like I'm way more scared of cars than I am of guns. I don't give a fuck about guns. When the guns are around, I am totally comfortable. And my father died by a gun, so it's like we both have personal experiences with guns, and yet I have more fear of cars than I do of guns. That's for sure. Do you mind me going on a little bit of tangent about guns real quick?
Sure,
for a couple minutes?
Yeah.
My thoughts on guns are obviously I'm very pro liberty and freedom on guns. I just think that we should trust people to be responsible with themselves. I think the age of owning guns should be lowered. I don't think there should be any kind of restrictions on guns. As far as like the only restrictions on weapons I think that the public shouldn't be able to own are obviously weapons of mass destruction, nuclear bombs, shit like that. I'm kind of on the fence about owning tanks privately. I'm not sure. Like maybe they can own tanks, but not tanks that are armed and ready to shoot. But I'm more freedom focused than anything else. But something that's important about guns is when you look at gun deaths in our country, suicide makes up a significant portion of that, like a majority portion of that. And so when you talk about gun violence, when the liberals talk about gun violence, a lot of the times they're adding in those suicides into it, which is very misleading. You're more likely to be hit by a car than to die in a mass shooting. Mass shooting percentages is like 0.001%. That's you're gonna be your cause of death. You're gonna die by cancer or in a car crash more than a mass shooting. Even though mass shootings every time they're just in the news a lot. And it's so that there's some facts there. Also, I think that suicide is a right. I know that this is something that you and I disagree on strongly, and that we've had this conversation before on the podcast. But I think that guns need to remain legal, because if someone doesn't want to live anymore, I think that they have the right to make that decision, and guns are an easy way to make that decision. We don't have to dwell on that one for too long, because I know we disagree on that. But one of the main things about guns that I think that society ignores overall is that when you look at your cell phone, it can identify faces. And I don't know why guns don't have that technology. And I do know why guns don't have that technology. It's because the Republicans don't want them to. Because Republicans are scared that if we create smart guns that are able to identify faces, that are able to identify heat sources, to identify humanoid figures, that they can lock the trigger and won't shoot. And Republicans are scared that if that becomes the norm, then the liberals will say, okay, that's the norm. We want to ban real guns. We are only going to allow smart guns. And I understand that fear, but I'm a small government person. I don't think that just because smart guns exist in the economy doesn't mean that real guns will necessarily go away unless the Democrats really take over the government wholeheartedly and try to get rid of them completely. But smart guns, I think it gives you an option. It would open up the market. It would create more jobs, and it would help our economy by adding more into the gun market. And then also, when you go to buy a gun, you have more options, and you can say, hey, I want a real shotgun, or I want the shotgun I can just use to shoot at targets, and when I point it at my friend, the trigger is gonna lock and it's not gonna shoot. So I think that I feel like there's a lot of benefits for the economy, for society as a whole, if we just completely legalize guns and then open up some more options, because the liberals want to ban guns and Republicans want to ban smart guns. It's like, let's not ban anything and just let society figure it out on their own. We can trust people to make the right decisions. Do you have any thoughts on smart guns?
Let me tell you my thoughts on what you just said. It's pretty much all wrong. But on smart guns, I think that is something that is a brilliant idea. Like, there's a movie on Netflix called What Happened to Monday, and it's a great movie. I would recommend you watch it. But anyway, in any case,
that's the one about the clone that goes missing, right?
The clones, yeah, they're seven sisters.
Okay.
Anyway, the guns are used, or when the guns are used, the officer, their fingerprint has to be on, or their palm print, whatever it is, has to be on the trigger. It can't be somebody else's, or the gun doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
That's brilliant. What it would take to put that into effect, I'm not so sure.
A fingerprint gun?
Well, just whatever it. Yeah. Okay. A fingerprint gun or.
I mean, the technology exists in phones. I'm not sure how accurate it is in phone. I don't have a high tech phone by any means, but the technology I think is there.
Well, wait here. Hold on. Let's see.
Do you have a fingerprint phone?
I do. So let's see if your fingerprint.
Oh, live on air testing. Let's do this.
Okay. So. Hold on.
How do I do this?
So just put your thumb. No, I use my thumb. So put your thumb on my phone.
Anywhere?
No, it's right here down.
Down
you don't
here?
have a thumb thing on your phone?
No, I don't have a thumb thing.
So
no
it's
match.
no match. Now let's see what happens when I do it.
Man.
It lets me into my phone.
Oh, look at that. Look, the technology
That's
exists.
been there forever.
Just put
on phones,
that on a gun. Put that on a gun right there.
Yeah, but I don't manufacture guns. I don't know how simple it is. And
they would probably be more expensive, but I bet the technology is there, and I bet there's a market for it.
But what do you mean about pointing it at your friend to? Like,
when I take a picture with my phone, it recognizes faces immediately. And what you would do is you would just have a mechanism on the gun that when you point it at someone, it recognizes the face and it locks the trigger so you can't actually shoot. Or we have thermal vision. I'm not sure how expensive thermal vision is that the military uses, but you could have a gun that when it points at a heat source, the trigger locks up as well. Now that's when you come into like, wait a minute, when I'm hunting, I'm pointing at heat sources as well. But that's when you could try to get the gun to recognize humanoid shapes as opposed to like deer shapes. Deers and humans look quite a bit different, So I'm just saying that there's a whole bunch of technology in our phone that is mind-blowing, and we need to put some of that into guns to make guns safer. And it doesn't mean I want to get rid of regular guns. I just think that the option for smart guns should be out there, and that the market in society will buy those guns. There's a lot of liberals out there who enjoy shooting guns. Sarah Silverman on her liberal show on Hulu that she does, she's very much anti-guns, but she went to her. I don't know if you know Sarah Silverman's show. It's like where she goes and talks to. Well, she has a show where she goes and talks to conservative families to talk about what's going on. Why they voted for Trump and stuff like that. And there was one family that took her shooting, and she was like, "Shooting guns is so fun, but I'm like afraid of these things." And it's like, if we made smart guns, liberals might, like, if Apple made a gun liberals would go buy it and be like, check out this gun, it's super cool. Because
Yeah,
shooting guns is a lot of
yeah.
fun, and it's like, I don't have to worry about hurting people with this one because it's safe, and it would open up the option for a bigger market. A lot of people are, when they see a gun, they start shaking. They're like, I'm really uncomfortable because the gun's in the room. I know people like that. But if you had smart
I would
guns,
say I'm even a little bit like that. Like
yeah,
my older brother and my younger brother, they are both gun owners,
yeah,
and they both use them for self-defense, but they're also both people who probably are a little bit more emotionally volatile than I am.
yeah,
So I would say if anybody should own a gun responsibly, it would be me.
Mhm.
But anyway, yeah, when they have their guns around, I'm kind of just like, I'm not thinking they're going to shoot me, but there's always just potential
See,
for it
I
to
grew
happen.
up around guns, so it's a little bit different for me. But I understand that people do feel that way. But if you knew that gun, if Apple made a gun that had all that security benefits in it, you'd probably feel a lot safer, wouldn't you?
Well, here's what I don't like about what you said is that the recognition part, because okay, anybody in your friends list on Facebook, it's uploaded to your gun and it can't shoot them. Okay, well, what if all of a sudden husband comes home drunk from the bar, starts beating his wife? Oh, the gun's not going to shoot at him because, you know,
Well, that's definitely.
or what if
See,
it's so close up you can't recognize
I
the person?
yeah, there's we're I'm supporting opening up the market and innovation. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. And those guns would be a lot more safe. They would be a lot safer than standard guns. And also, if you buy a gun that's a safe gun, if Apple made a gun and you buy that gun, you say, I bought this gun because I just want to do shooting as a sport. I just like shooting targets. And you buy that gun, you own that gun in your home, and then your husband comes and beats you. It's like, yes, that gun's not going to be able to shoot your husband, but if you were so worried about that, get a real gun.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we could also make the option to turn off the safety mechanisms. Like you could have a big orange button on the gun that when it's deactivated, it's a big orange button that says, "Hey, this gun is live. This gun is ready to shoot a human." And then when you press the button, it goes black. It hides the orange, and then it's like, okay, this gun's in safe mode. It's not going to shoot a human because it recognizes faces. There's options out there, and the technology on the phone is impressive, but there's also a lot more to grow. So I think that as a libertarian, I'm a supporter of the free market and innovation and just growing the industry. And I think that there's a lot more of opening up the market that can do with creating smart guns.
Well, we've spent a lot of time on smart guns, which I don't think we intended to spend as much time talking about it. And I think we're pretty much on the same page, is that they're a good idea,
Mhm.
and you and I have different ideas of what they should be like, but that's neither here nor there really. So
But did you want to focus on with guns?
there's just so much.
There is, yeah.
There's so much. And
How about mass shootings? Do you have any ideas of what we can do to stop mass shootings?
okay, here's what I wrote on our outline. We do have an outline for our shows, but we don't really stick to them. As you can see, we go off on tangents. But one thing I wrote, which really started like weighing on me today, and I spent a good part of the day preparing for this podcast, just going through all these stories and ideas and mass shootings and what we can do to stop them. And then after that, I said something has to change. Now, there was the recent shooting in Thousand Oaks, California. This happened between today and when we, on our last podcast, said we're going to be
It
talking
happened in
about
the last
guns.
couple of days. It happened right after the election.
Exactly.
Pretty much,
So
and it was a significant shooting. 12 people died.
They're getting pretty.
13,
I mean,
including the
they're
shooter.
getting pretty frequent, and I.
Yeah, there was a shooting. Where was it? Where was the last one? Oh, it was at the synagogue. There was a shooting at the synagogue. I can't remember how many people died at that one.
Just if you just Google mass shootings or mass shootings in U.S.
There's a Wikipedia page that shows it.
Yeah,
all.
Wikipedia will
list.
show it, and I don't fully agree with it because like sometimes it'll be like
There's a definition. It's like at least 3 or 4 people have to die.
yeah, but that's true. And what I don't like about it is like sometimes the shooters involved and like the person who died. One of them I read was like somebody who went on a killing spree. Like that's not a mass shooting.
It's a serial killer.
That's it's a quick time serial killer.
Yeah.
So anyway, but there's still, I would say like this year the U.S. has had at least like 10 big mass shootings, and back before Columbine, I don't think this was a really big issue.
There were a couple. I mean, there was I think the Oakland bomber, the car bomber, the guy who he had the car bomb that he drove into the building, and then there was also
That's a bomb.
Yeah, it's true. There was a sniper at one of the college campuses. He had a rifle of some sort with a scope on it, and he went up into a really tall tower at a campus, and he killed, I don't know, like 19 people or something like that. He was sniping people for a significant amount of time at a college campus. That happened a long time ago, before Columbine. I believe it was like in the 80s or 70s or 90s, somewhere in that 3 decades. But what were you gonna say?
Just that, you know, Columbine, I think, is like what we think of as the first. Let's not just say mass shooting. Let's say school shootings, okay?
Right.
Because school shootings
kids are supposed to be safe outside of school,
according to South Park.
Yeah.
No, so school shootings are a part of the mass shootings, and they're way too big of a part. And this is where the cognitive abilities of children. This is my reason why we don't sell 13 and 14-year-old guns, and I don't know why that would ever cross your mind, Riley. But you're Riley, so that's how you think. I just think that with these mass shootings, I don't know. I'm just like thinking something's got to be done. But
well, that's the entire country.
The left is saying less guns, and then the right's kind of not. The right's kind of saying, well, mental illness. Well, if you talk about mental illness, like 1 in 5 people are in the U.S. are diagnosed with depression. And I don't like being an open book, but for the sake of the podcast, I'll just say I do take Prozac, which is an antidepressant. If that was to stop me from getting a gun, I'd be pretty pissed, because I know myself, and I know that I'm not going to shoot it for any other reason than self-defense. So all these answers that are being given aren't working. Like, they're not like, if somebody can send us, I would love for our listeners to send us a comment. How could we stop mass shootings? Because we can get rid of guns, but
that should be the title of the podcast, is how do we stop mass shootings?
That is what it's going to be. But drug use is illegal. People still get drugs. Okay. If we, if a person can't get heroin, then they'll get crack instead or whatever. So if we don't have the gun available, people will use bombs. We often remember what happens, but we don't remember what didn't happen. We criticize the CIA and the FBI when things drop through or fall through the cracks, like the Parkland shooting and whatnot. But all the things that they have stopped, all the school shootings that have been stopped aren't as much reported on. There was a kid who his friend called him in, and the police, like at the school, found his trunk full of guns and explosives. And what I was going to say is, back with Columbine, what you have to remember is they did go around shooting people, but they also had bombs in the cafeteria. And
I think they all failed to explode.
I think that happened, or either one like partially exploded or didn't do anything. But the fact is we don't remember that, because what we remember is 13 people died from the shooting. So even if, let's say, the cafeteria blew its lid off, that's nothing compared to the kids that died.
Yeah.
And if nobody died from the bombs, we're not focusing on that. So I guess what it really comes down to is accessibility of guns. But when at the same time, I talk about cognitive things. When you talk about an 18 through a 20-year-old, some of those people are really responsible. We allow them to serve in our military. We allow them to drive on our streets. We allow them to hold jobs. And some of them are, even though they're young, they've started a family, but they're not old enough to have a firearm to protect their family.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's in a situation where they use a gun for self-defense, let's say they're 22, 2 years prior they were 19,
mm-hmm.
or they were 20. Sorry.
Yeah.
What if they had been in that exact same situation 2 years prior? And also felons. Not every felon is a violent person. Now, a lot of them are, but what if a felon made a one-time mistake and
if they serve their time, I think they should be able to have a gun.
Yeah, well, and I mostly agree with that. Except for people who have a really big violent streak, But I don't know. I guess I'm just baffled right now with these mass shootings, and I want to know how do we stop them? Because one theory, I thought about this and then I read about it today, is that one theory is that kids are seeing these mass shootings and they're learning from them, and some of them are trying to beat the record. There have been a couple of people who we haven't even heard of because there was a guy who was only able to get to one kid and then his gun jammed.
Yeah.
But in his manifesto, he wrote that he wanted to beat whatever the record was up until then. And I don't know. I think it's something now that
there's copycat killers. Now
it's
there's being a scoreboard, and that's kind of how the media portrays it. They have that number big bold white letters on the screen. 12 did.
Exactly, and that was something else I was reading was, why do we always list the number of people dead? That's for there's purely numbers, or sorry, the media. Them getting viewers. When it says 30 people are dead, or biggest shooting in this state ever, that gets people tuned in.
Yep.
But that also gets other people thinking, how can I beat that?
Yeah. Something about the media that is interesting is that the place where I get a lot of my news is Philip DeFranco. I'm a big fan of him, his YouTube channel. And he has a policy that he'll cover mass shootings, but he never reveals the identity, the name, or the picture of the shooter because he doesn't like to give them attention. Because that's one reason why people go out and shoot, is because they're like, hey, after I do this, I'm going to go down in history. They're going to be remembered. And that's what a lot of them want, is they just want to be remembered. They want to be noticed. And I don't like that, because I'm the kind of guy who likes to go and research them and see what's going on in their mind. The first thing I do is after a mass shooting is I go to this website called heavy.com, and they usually have the information really good right away on all the mass shootings and all the who the killers are and what their family is and history and stuff like that. And I like reading that stuff because I'm interested in the psychology of these killers. I don't know what that says about me, but I think based on the amount of crime shows on TV, I'm guessing I'm not the only one who thinks that way, who's curious about the psychology behind these people. But as far as the mass shootings go, a lot of the liberals, they say, why don't we just try out gun control and see how it works? And unfortunately, the government doesn't work out that way. We don't just work by trying things out. We can't just create a law and then repeal the law nothing if it doesn't work, So,
and what about for people who are already gun owners?
Yeah,
we're gonna take them away just for a trial period.
Yeah, I understand the liberals saying hey, let's just try gun control and see how it works. And it's yeah, we can go ahead and try that and create it in the law. But then if it doesn't work, it's going to take a lot of time and money and effort to get those rights back. And I'm just not willing to give up my rights for you guys to say, oh, well, that didn't work, so we need to take away more of your rights to,
Exactly.
And that's what scares me, as well as Republicans, libertarians, So that's why I don't think that giving a trial period. My solution for mass shootings is obviously having guns on the scene already. And let me explain that a little bit more. I think Republicans say they want small government, but they're all liars. They would just want big government in a Republican way. And they want to arm teachers, which I agree with. However, they want to say teachers need to have guns by the government. They need training by the government. I say teachers are allowed to have guns. They're not forced to have guns. But if a teacher feels that they want to bring a gun to the classroom to keep themselves and their students protected, I am totally okay with that. I don't think it's something that we should force on teachers, because there's a lot of teachers who don't want to have guns. They don't want to have to learn how to use guns. But there are teachers who say, like, yeah, I'd be comfortable with having a gun in the class. I think that having a security guard at school who has a gun, like a trained officer at the school, well, first of all, this is a whole other debate. I strongly disagree with the school system in this society. I think having a bunch of teenagers in a building locked together in small rooms for 7 hours a day is a terrible idea, not just for mass shooting purposes, but for development purposes. So, first of all, I think getting rid of schools, and that's an entirely other topic, but that I think that's one solution, is we need to change the school system. But as far as the school system we have right now, and it's not just schools, it's like other places of mass population where, like, a concert in Vegas, like he shot into a crowd at a concert. At the bar, I'm sure at the bar in Thousand Oaks, I'm sure the bar was pretty crowded. I mean, he was able to get 12 kills. So I think that just having security, armed guards on places where there's lots of people is a good idea. And I'm not afraid to say that we record our podcast here in Issaquah, Washington. And Issaquah has a festival every year called Salmon Days. And Salmon Days is a super crowded thing. It takes up 2 whole streets. And when it goes on, there are people literally on every square inch of ground. There is a person. It gets super fucking crowded. And yet, there hasn't been a mass shooting there. And if you look at the reason why, it's because at every single section of that block where all the streets cross and where the streets end and stuff, there are literally armored trucks there. And it's like no one can take a gun into there, because if anyone saw them carrying a rifle or anything, the police would have them down in a second. Now, you could carry a pistol in your bag or something, but you're not going to get that many kills with a pistol. As soon as you shoot one, all the police officers there, they're going to be hunting your ass down. So I think security is a strong, not only deterrent, but it's an effective way to, the killings won't necessarily stop, but they will be significantly reduced, because if someone sneaks a pistol in the Salmon Days, they might get 1 kill, but then they're going to be taken down right then and there, as opposed to as if they had a rifle and they could just fire into the crowd endlessly, because no one there had a gun to stop them. So I do think that guns are the answer. Having more guns at the scene is the answer. I don't think that government legislation telling people that you have to have guns is the answer.
So let me say a couple things of what I think. I agree with you that forcing teachers to have guns is not the right answer. Allowing them to have guns, that's kind of iffy to me, but that, along with security guards in schools, won't necessarily keep people safe, because you want to cause destruction, take out the security guard first.
Yeah.
And we had 2 at my school. They were pretty lazy, just sat around, monitored the parking lot to make sure no kids left.
But the way schools are right now is those weren't real security guards. They were people wearing security jackets. I'm talking about armed security guards, people who are actually there to do a job. Okay. Whereas most places, security guards, quote unquote, at the school is just the basketball coach wearing a security jacket. Yeah. And they're not allowed to have a gun either, because it's a gun-free zone.
Well, and the NRA has talked about the solution being a police officer an armed police officer in every school in America. And that's great in theory, but if I went to a high school where there was over 2,000 people, and the layout was one huge building, and then across you had to go over this long bridge, and within this forested area, we had this, it was called our East Campus.
Yeah.
And that was a whole separate part of the school. And then there were the portables. And so having an armed guard, or let's say at the school I went to, even having 3 armed guards, isn't going to stop a kid from getting a gun and just opening up whatever classroom door and going crazy on the class. And then if he's able to, moving on to the next one. If his intention is to get as many kills and then die, mm-hmm. I think...
But it will prevent him from walking from classroom to classroom and just shooting into the rooms endlessly. Like I'm saying, the fact of the matter is that we both agree that getting rid of guns isn't going to get rid of mass destruction. And so we have to admit that there's no way to get rid of mass shootings altogether if we legalize guns. But what we can do is reduce them. And that's an important factor with security guards on the campuses. Is that I don't know the statistics of all the shootings. I don't know the facts about all of them. But you can't, with a shooting, you'd assume a kid with like a AK-47 that's semi-automatic could just open up a door, shoot a few rounds into the room, go into the next door, shoot a few rounds into the room of loaded classrooms filled with kids, And whereas if you had a security guard, as soon as he hears one bullet and a fire alarm goes off, someone pulled it. All of a sudden, he can go there and stop the kid from doing that. Whereas if there's no one on, you have to wait for the police otherwise to show up with their guns.
But what I'm saying is like the size of my school was literally like, and then beyond that was, there's the track and the tennis court, which was like, I mean, we're probably talking like 3 or 4 acres my school was on, covered probably,
but the security guard would still be there faster than the cops.
I mean, I don't know about that, because if you have the security guard at one side,
the cops are generally pretty slow.
Nah, not always actually. In Thousand Oaks, they responded within 3 minutes.
Okay.
And our bell time used to be 7 minutes in high school because that was the time. If you walked very fast, it would take you to get from the furthest classroom to the next furthest the furthest corners. And I've talked to other people, and they said like in high school, like we had 4 minutes between classes, and we had, like I said, was it 7 or 9? I don't know. We had like one that was longer than most because of how big our school was. And I remember there were times where like I probably walked at least a couple of blocks to get to my next class. Now, these weren't actual blocks. It was all within campus.
Yeah.
But I had to go down the 3 flights of stairs, down the hallway, cross over the bridge, take the elevator up to the 2nd floor. So what I'm saying is having a security guard is, in some campuses, you'd have to have like 6 or 7 to equal the equivalent of how long would it take the cops to get there. And then even then, the shooter can take out the ones in his own area. So I think what it comes down to is there is no answer for this. This will continue to happen, and it's because of human nature. And I hate to say that, and it's disappointing, and it's pessimistic, but I do not think there is a way to stop mass shootings. There has got to be a way to limit them, though, to where like every time we're turning on the TV, it's another one,
Yeah.
It's getting ridiculous. It's getting out of control. And I feel like, it's people seeing it and thinking, oh, that's how I can resolve my anger issues or whatnot. And I don't know if, taking it off the media is a good idea. Probably not, because people have the right to the information. But there's just, I don't know. I kind of get at a loss of words as I think about this because of how much I thought about it today.
Yeah.
That what the conclusion I came to is there is no real one answer. You can give people guns, but then if in the heat of the moment, the wrong person could shoot somebody else,
Yeah.
And even if we talk about limiting the kills like at salmon days, even if the person gets in 2 kills before the police are able to get to them, that's still 2 people who died. Yeah. That's 2 people too many, So,
but they could do that with a car.
They could, and it was done at the Charleston statue thing. So, and it has been done, and it's been done throughout, I think, the history of cars. It's like there was this movie on Netflix where it based off a real story. I think the girl's name was like Olga or something, and she had some messed up childhood. So she got in a truck and just went down a street full of people and was able to kill like 18 people in the truck. And the cops are like, "Did you fall asleep? What happened?" And in a dazed look, she says, "No, I meant to kill them." And then right there, they like take her like seriously, like you're not another victim, like
Yeah.
you did this. And I think destruction is just gonna happen, and that guns are part of the problem, but they're not the real problem. The problem,
Maybe society just needs to be happier, and we need to do that by having less divisive politics.
yeah, but I don't think it's just politics
For
in
sure.
general. I think there's lots of things that divide us that don't need to divide us, but I think it's also, you see a lot of these shooters, they have some mental issues, like,
Most of them have backgrounds of violence.
and like the guy yesterday, or not yesterday, a couple days ago at the Thousand Oaks, he was a ex-military, so automatically I thought PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know, I haven't read up on that, but it's just, I don't know. I'm just saying I don't know a lot,
Yeah.
this podcast, because I thought we were gonna have this big discussion, but I just can't, like, there's no
It's
simple,
a dark topic. That's
there
for
is
sure.
no simple answer, and taking away people's freedoms and rights in America, in a country where we constantly talk about our freedoms and our rights, is not the answer. That's what I can say for sure.
I got two things I want to talk about. Do you have anything else that you wanted to bring up about guns?
I'll probably think of something later. But
Okay, so first thing, real quick, is that people will, if any liberals watch this, they'll want to bring up the straight white male thing because most of the people who do mass shootings are straight white men. And straight white men who not only that, but have violence towards women in their past. Honestly, I don't have an answer for that. However, this year alone, there have been 2 shooters. One of them was a black lesbian woman. I'm not sure. I think she killed only a small amount. It was only covered in the news slightly because it wasn't that big of a deal. And then at the YouTube campus, an Iranian woman walked in there with a gun and loaded off a couple rounds, but I don't think she killed anyone. So it seems predominantly straight white males are doing it with violence towards women in their past, but that doesn't mean it's exclusively them. Like I said, there was a black lesbian woman and an Iranian
and
woman
actually, on one of the mass shootings I was looking at on Wikipedia, it said it was a racially motivated thing, and I was like, oh gosh, like, let's see about this. And it said the black guy was out seeking white victims, and it went up to like a work truck, like where these 2 guys were in them, and shot at the passenger like 4 times and killed him. But the guy he was black, and like his name was like something Mohammed. So I think he converted to Islam, even though he grew up.
My only response to this,
but anyway, so the driver though was Hispanic, and he spared him, like, and then the guy drove him to like the police station where he died. And so you're right, it can go both ways, but really, what are we going to do? Lock up every straight white male? Like,
yeah, that is a thing where they the liberals will bring up, it's white men doing this, and it's like, what can you really do about
it's
that?
fucked up white men too. Like,
it's, I mean, that's what I was gonna say. Is my only excuse for this is that maybe straight white males are having a hard time, and so we just feel like we need to go shoot people.
Well, and there's the whole stigma about men not being willing to talk about their mental illness, which I feel like this day and age, like, everybody's on something. Just shut up and go talk to a doctor.
Yeah.
And whenever it's a black mass shooting, it's called, gang violence, and a lot of those aren't recorded with the mass shootings. And so they do happen, but if a mass shooting happens in Chicago, it's not called a mass shooting. And that's another thing I want to bring up about these is mass shootings make up 1% of all the deaths of gun violence and gun deaths in America. And in the same month that the Las Vegas shooting happened, the same amount of people died in Chicago alone from homicide by a gun. But we didn't cover Chicago's death spree during that month. We covered the fact that a bunch of people at one concert in Las Vegas died. So
maybe the fact of the matter is that straight white men are just better at planning and execution.
I don't. In any case,
that was clearly a joke.
Okay,
clearly a joke.
And what I was saying was not anything against black people. My thing was that I think, like, I've kind of noticed, like, you don't really see a lot of black people on, like, antidepressants or antipsychotics. Like it's
I
always
don't
like
know that. I mean,
fucked up white people. So like what I'm saying is like when it is a black person, it's like a gang community, and so therefore it counts as a gang death and not a mass shooting. So.
For sure. Let me see. The last topic I wanted to bring up is we can't talk about guns without talking about 3D printed guns. It's something that's been in the media recently. Let me get the facts on this straight before we even talk about it. If you first of all, a 3D printer is thousands of dollars, and the ink is also very expensive. So only wealthy people can make 3D printed guns. Second of all, making them isn't super easy. You have to download the forms offline, and then you have to figure out how to put them into the program to actually get them printed. Second of all, when you print a handgun that's 3D printed, it shoots one round and then it melts and it's completely unusable. So it shoots a single round. The assault or the rifles that you can print on 3D printers, they can shoot a single magazine and then they melt and they're completely unusable. And not only that, but you cannot make everything in the 3D printer. There is a metal mechanism that you do have to buy from external source, so you can't create everything with the 3D printer. However, 3D printing technology is getting better, so the guns will get better, and soon you will not need to buy any external metal pieces. You'll be able to create everything in the 3D printer. I'm not scared of 3D printed guns, and I'm thankful they're there, because if the government ever decides to get rid of guns in the United States, 3D printed guns, there's actually a court case right now saying that code, like computer code, is technically free speech, so they'll never be able to get rid of it. And that's what it is when you download a file to make a 3D printed gun, you're downloading code to make the gun. So if the government ever decides to overreach and take away our right to guns, the people who care about guns can still make 3D printed guns, and I am happy for that.
Well, and on that subject, that's part of the reason a lot of conservatives talk about gun rights is because if the state ever does decide to rise up and take rights away from citizens, the government's going to be armed. So the citizens should be too. Mm-hmm. And again, it's very unlikely that it happens in the U.S., that it's going to happen in the U.S. But
like a revolt?
Yeah, but we've seen other countries where it has happened. Mm-hmm. Everywhere where not everywhere, most places where they've taken away guns from the mass amount of people, destruction followed, mm-hmm. And, Hitler took away guns from Jewish people, mm-hmm. and then,
we all know how that ended.
The Gestapo went in and nothing to protect them from the government,
Yeah.
So I don't know. No easy answers, but if anybody has the easy answers, please let us know.
Someone out there has an easy answer.
Email us at quadrant4politics@gmail.com.
Any final words? Or are we all set?
I think we're all set.
Okay, yeah, we got our points across. So thanks for listening to our episode of Quadrant 4 Politics. We appreciate it. Be sure to check us out on SoundCloud and YouTube. Please like, comment, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. Email us at quadrant4politics@gmail.com. And thank you for joining me today, Matt.
Joining you. This is our show.
I'm just saying thanks, man, for being here.
Of course. No problem. Glad to support.
All right, thanks for watching, guys. See you later.